Dear Daily News Report viewers, after watching this video, you can reach the video we shared yesterday by clicking on the top right button. The main topic of yesterday's video is how we can protect impacts of economic crisis. We recommend watching, subscribing, and sharing. Thanks in advance. As businesses remain closed during the coronavirus pandemic, an unrelenting jobs crisis continues to push Americans onto unemployment rolls. Another 5.2 million workers filed for their first week of unemployment benefits last week, according to the United States Department of Labor, bringing the total number of Americans who have filed initial jobless claims to around 22 million, or roughly 13.5% of the labor force since March 14. Overall, the last 4 weeks have marked the largest and most dramatic rise in claims on record since the Labor Department started tracking the data in 1967. It is straining state unemployment agencies' ability to handle the crush of filers and threaten to drain some states' unemployment trust funds in coming weeks. Other jobs crises have played out far more slowly. In the Great Recession, for example, unemployment declined by 8.6 million workers between its peak in November 2007 and through in December 2009. This time, mass layoffs and furloughs came suddenly as states enacted lockdowns of all but essential businesses to slow the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. Even so, the data showed most states reported declines in claims from the prior week on an adjusted basis, suggesting that the breakneck pace of job losses is starting to slow. If just a bit, filing last week could also have been limited by the Good Friday holiday. Continuing claims, or the total number of Americans receiving unemployment benefits, jumped by 4.53 million to a record 12 million in the week ended April 4. Those figures are reported with a 1-week lag. The S&P 500 index of United States stocks rose at the open, while 10-year Treasury yields were lower and the dollar was higher. Other reports Thursday showed the broadening and deepening impact of efforts aimed at preventing the spread of COVID-19. Housing starts slumped in March by the most since 1984, while manufacturing in the Philadelphia Fed's region contracted in April by the most since 1980. Last week also marked when banks were starting to lend to small businesses to keep payrolls intact. Part of a $2 trillion stimulus package, the Paycheck Protection Program was on the verge of depleting its $349 billion in funds this week, and lawmakers were haggling over boosting the plan while many companies reported difficulty accessing the money. In addition to the extent to which the pandemic is brought under control, the delivery of stimulus funds to Americans and businesses will help determine the speed of any recovery in output and employment. Most economists expect a rebound starting in the second half, though it could take several years or longer to return to employment levels seen before the COVID-19 arrived in the United States. The scale and speed of the layoffs is without precedent. Before last week, the sharpest rise in unemployment claims was in 1982, when filings rose by 695,000. It has been over 2 weeks since Brandy Bennett was let go from her housekeeping job at the DoubleTree Hotel Atlanta in Waikiki, Hawaii. Yet the single mother of 3 has yet to successfully file for unemployment insurance. Whenever she tries to file on Hawaii's website, it crashes. Every time it would just kick me out. It's very frustrating. You have to have patience because there's a lot of unemployment, Bennett said. The crisis has effectively shut down Hawaii's $17 billion tourism industry, leaving thousands of workers like Bennett unemployed. Over 82,000 workers in a state of 1.5 million people filed for unemployment in March. It's just so stressful. The fact that I have to provide for my kids, I have to make sure I can still pay my bills, and my lawns, it's a lot, Bennett said. It's a struggle right now. On Friday, the Bureau of Labor Statistics will release its first monthly jobs report since the COVID-19 crisis hit the United States. It is expected to show the first rise in unemployment in more than 9 years. The figures were collected in the middle of last month, before General Electric, Macy's, Marriott, and others laid off workers. Economists are forecasting a rise to 4% unemployment, up from a 50-year low of 3.5% in February, and ending a record 113 months of growth in the jobs market. The figure will probably be revised sharply upwards next month when more data is available. Using a model based on unemployment insurance claims, Rogers, professor of public policy at the Blueston School for Planning and Public Policy at Rogers University, expect to see sharp regional and racial differences in unemployment emerge, alongside a 19% unemployment rate for African Americans. He calculates the unemployment rate for Latin workers has risen to 17% from 4.4%, and teen unemployment has hit 25% just weeks into the United States crisis. Rogers also expects a widening gap in unemployment rates across the country. In Louisiana, he predicts unemployment could rise to 44.9% from 5.3% as oil and gas production are hit by falling oil prices and tourism to New Orleans. Currently in the midst of one of the country's worst coronavirus outbreaks dries up. At the end of March, New Orleans had reported 1,834 total cases of COVID-19 infection and 101 deaths. It is too early to say how long this will go, said Rogers. We really are in uncharted waters, he said. It comes as all businesses seen as non-essential have been closed in nearly every state, with deep job losses inflicted on every industry. Some economists think the unemployment rate will rise as high as 20%, soaring past the damage inflicted during the financial crisis just over a decade age to a level unmatched since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Layoffs are spreading beyond the likes of hotels, bars and restaurants, which absorbed the initial job cuts to encompass white-collar occupations, including software programmers and salespeople. The latest figures underscore the likelihood that the United States, like other major economies, is being tipped into a severe recession by the impact of the coronavirus crisis. Earlier this week, the IMF forecast that the American economy will shrink by 5.9% in 2020, while some experts think the damage caused will be even worse before an expected rebound when the lockdown ends. Notable United States job announcements in recent days have come from electronics chain Best Buy, which said, "If we furlough 51,000 employees," and Toast, a software company that works with restaurants and has cut 1,300 jobs, half its workforce. The latest jobs figures come a day after dismal data showing a record drop in United States retail sales in March and the biggest decline in factory output since 1946. Many people have been struggling for weeks to file for unemployment benefits via overwhelmed and outdated websites. And while the government has rushed to help by authorizing trillions in stimulus, delays in getting the money to households and businesses, as well as a possible shortage of program funds, could push the jobless rate higher or keep it elevated for longer. We don't have the administrative systems to get $2.2 trillion into the economy in 3 weeks, said Claudia Sam, Director of Macroeconomic Policy at the Washington Center for Equitable Growth. What we have right now is a race between the virus wreaking havoc on the economy and the relief trying to get out. If initial jobless claims don't begin leveling off, a 30% unemployment rate moves from the realm of possibility to the most likely forecast, said Sam, a former Federal Reserve economist. That will be triple the 10% seen in the wake of the global financial crisis, and even above the roughly 25% seen during the Great Depression. Though the methodology for what figure was different, the median estimate of economists in a Bloomberg survey earlier this month was for a second quarter jobless rate of 12.6%. The official unemployment rate only includes those actively looking for a job. That means that the 1.76 million increase in Americans outside the labor force in March, the largest jump in 7 decades of data covering people not actively looking for work, isn't reflected in the jobless rate, and those figures cover early March, before the vast majority of coronavirus-related layoffs. Historically, jobless claims also understate the number of people out of work. In 2018, only 26% of unemployed people who had worked in the last 12 months actually applied for benefit payments, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Uptake is likely to be higher now. However, given the unique circumstances of COVID-19, oftentimes people didn't take the unemployment insurance because there was an opportunity to find another job. That is not the case right now, said Diane Swonk, chief economist at Grant Thornton LLP. People who never took unemployment before would take it in this environment because they have no choice. How bad can it get? Economists are expecting job losses will continue, with the unemployment rate peaking in the double digits sometime in the next few months, up from 4.4% in March. This week's unemployment insurance claims are yet another indication of the recessionary dynamics created by the coronavirus pandemic. Moody's Senior Vice President Robert Williams wrote in emailed comments. That said, the government's economic relief package and policies by the Federal Reserve, including an additional $2.3 trillion in loans announced Thursday morning, will soften the blow a little bit. Bank of America economists predict employers will cut between 16 million and 20 million jobs with the unemployment rate peaking at 15.6% between now and June. If that's the case, it could take at least a couple years for unemployment to return to its pre-pandemic levels. Still, economists are hoping the recovery from this downturn will be faster than the long drawn-out recoveries from the Great Recession and Great Depression. But ultimately, that will depend on when the coronavirus outbreak is contained. These obviously are historically horrific data, but relative to the more extreme projections of 20% plus unemployment rate, the latest figures suggest we're tracking a bit lower than that, said Brett Ryan, senior United States economist at Deutsche Bank. We've seen 2 consecutive weeks of declines in initial claims. So from that perspective, we may have seen the peak in terms of the initial wave of unemployment. Most of the idea, comment, information, and criticism containing in these videos have been created by Daily News Report. Before making any important investment decision, use the information contained in these videos as a starting point for conducting your own research. If you make any investment or legal decision, it is wise to consult an expert before making this decision.